My influencer sister filmed me crying after a breakup, then posted a reel revealing our father's abuse without my consent. So I gathered receipts, exposed her lies to every brand she worked with, and watched her followers vanish overnight. Ever since my older sister Nancy became an influencer, things have never been the same between us. I still remember the first time I realized how much she'd changed. I was 19, crying my eyes out because my boyfriend had just cheated on me with his third cousin. At first, she was nice. She brought me ice cream, flowers, freshly baked cookies, the whole package. But as I paused my ugly crying to dig into my tub of gold medal ribbon from Baskin-Robbins, her phone waved in my face. Click. Flash. She then started making the story post. At first, I thought it was a joke, because she made it look like I was crying over my nail breaking, but then she actually posted it. I stared at her in disbelief, and she deleted the app so I couldn't force her to take it down. For some reason, she was shocked when I kicked her out of my dorm. She didn't even text me until 24 hours had passed. No, sorry. No, I'll never do it again. Just a my bee. But she's the only family member who I can talk to without being scared of getting hit or yelled at. So I forgave her, and planned to keep her at arm's length, until my new boyfriend became her prop. Thomas had nice hands, tatted, veiny, very masculine. So once a month, we'd all go out to eat together and she'd take photos of his arms and torso across the table. It was just to keep her followers on their toes. And because she never posted his face or tagged him, I was fine with it. Fast forward to 3 months later, meaning 3 more soft launches of Thomas. We were at the Capitol Grill, because my sister Nancy had insisted on paying. Everything was going well. I had just finished my exams, and I felt like I did good. So I was in a really lighthearted, goofy mood. And when I went to the restroom, I ran into my friend from high school. It was one of those days that felt like everything was going right. Until the next morning, when I saw Nancy's Instagram. This time it wasn't a story post. It was a reel, and in it was my boyfriend, but his hand was squeezing her thigh, and she filmed him from his face down to his ankles. My entire body went cold. I rubbed my eyes thinking I was mistaken, but then I saw he had been tagged in the post. I tried to send him a screenshot of it, but my message was green instead of blue. He had blocked me on everything. That's when Nancy called. I know you hate me right now, but hear me out. I was already crying, so I just nodded. Turns out she had paid my friend to distract me that day, because the entire thing was a test. You see, she claimed that after my last BF, she wanted to look out for me. So she flirted with my boyfriend and paid him to leave me and commit to her Instagram. And because he actually followed through, it was proof that he wasn't good enough for me. At that point, I was already done with her and her antics. Plus, arguing with Nancy was a waste of time TBH. So I simply told her that if she ever did anything like that again, I will cut her off. Eventually, she gave up and agreed. And you know that one Kanye tweet? If you feel suicidal, don't hang around people who make you want to unalive yourself. Well, turns out it's true, because the next 3 years without her went really smoothly. I graduated college with an extremely strong family-like friend group, and had finally found a loyal boyfriend called Charles. But the day I posted about my graduation party, Nancy called me. She told me I looked beautiful. Her voice was meek, regretful. I immediately broke into apology for not inviting her, and asked if she wanted to hang out. Suddenly her tone changed, and she sounded thrilled. So we planned a dinner for that same week. I purposely didn't tell her about my BF Charles, but there were so many updates on college that it wasn't even noticeable. As soon as I was done talking, she didn't respond to anything I said, just handed me a lip gloss and concealer stick so I could touch up for her page. But other than that, she told me she was now in therapy, and she's ashamed of how she handled the clout. I told her if she proved that she actually had changed, I would forgive her. We met up once a week after that, and I even let her in on my new BF. She seemed happy to not meet him, and I thought everything was finally okay. And until one day, when I realized I was even more naive than I thought. There I was, on a nice little walk by the local beach, when I got the notification. She had tagged me in a reel. It was a story time while she did her makeup. I thought it would be wholesome, because she started off by saying how amazing and beautiful I was, even put some photos of me on the screen. But as the video progressed, she started talking about our childhood. My heart dropped, and that's when my worst fears were confirmed. She told the entire world about how our dad had stolen my innocence. I dropped my phone in shock. My entire body was trembling. I checked the views. In just 2 hours, it had gotten 20,000 views. 20,000 people knew about the most vulnerable memory I had. But this time, I had the upper hand, because I wasn't the scared 19-year-old college girl anymore. I was a woman, the type to fight back, to make her regret ever thinking my forgiveness was weakness. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called my boyfriend Charles. He answered on the second ring. I told him what happened, my voice breaking. He immediately offered to come pick me up, but I needed to be alone. I needed to think. I spent the next hour sitting on a bench by the beach, watching the waves and planning. Nancy had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She had taken my trauma, my most private pain, and turned it into content. For likes, for views, for engagement. The comments under her video were a mix of sympathy, shock, and people asking for more details. She was responding to them all, playing the role of the supportive sister who was breaking the silence to help other victims. It made me sick. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities. When I got to my apartment, I sat down at my laptop and started making a list. Every manipulative thing Nancy had ever done to me. Every lie she'd told. Every time she'd used me for content without my permission. The list was long. Too long. And looking at it all together made me realize something important. Nancy wasn't going to stop. Ever. No matter how many chances I gave her, no matter how many boundaries I set, she would always find a way to cross them. So I had 2 choices. Cut her off completely, and hope she'd leave me alone, or find a way to make her stop for good. The first option seemed safer. But I knew Nancy. She'd just use my absence as more fuel for her content. My sister won't talk to me after I expose our family secret would be her next viral video. No. I needed to do something that would make her think twice before using me as content again. Something that would show her that her actions had consequences. Something that would hit her where it hurt. Her precious online image. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. Screenshots of texts where she admitted to paying Thomas to cheat on me. Emails where she pitched collaborations to brands using my trauma as her unique angle. Old videos she'd deleted but I'd saved, where she mocked her followers behind their backs. By the end of the week, I had a folder full of receipts. Proof that the person Nancy presented online wasn't real. That her authenticity was carefully crafted. That she would step on anyone, even her own sister, to get more views. Charles was worried about me. He kept saying I should just block her and move on. That revenge wouldn't make me feel better. But he didn't understand. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. I needed to make sure she could never hurt me like this again. I decided to start small. I found the email addresses of the 3 biggest brands she worked with and sent them the video of her mocking their products. Within days, all 3 had publicly announced they were ending their partnerships with her. Nancy called me screaming. She knew it was me. I didn't deny it. I told her this was just the beginning unless she took down the video about our dad and posted a public apology. She hung up on me. The video stayed up. So I moved to phase 2. I contacted her manager with evidence that Nancy had been buying followers and engagement. The manager dropped her the next day. Nancy showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. I didn't let her in. I just texted her the same demand. Take down the video, post an apology. She left after an hour of yelling through the door. I still felt the adrenaline pumping through my veins as I leaned against my apartment door. Nancy's angry footsteps echoed down the hallway as she finally gave up and left. My phone buzzed with a text from Charles asking if I was okay. I quickly replied that I was fine and would call him later. The thing about Nancy is that she never backs down easily. I knew this was just the beginning of our battle. And honestly, I was kind of scared of what she might do next. But I was more scared of doing nothing and letting her continue to exploit my trauma for views. I checked her Instagram the next morning. The video was still up, now with over 50,000 views. But she'd added a new story, her crying in her car, mascara running down her face. The caption read, "Being attacked by your own family when all you're trying to do is raise awareness." I nearly threw my phone across the room. She was playing the victim now. Of course she was. I should have seen that coming. My phone rang. It was my friend Elizabeth from college. I almost didn't answer, but then I realized she might have seen the video. Elizabeth didn't waste time with small talk. She told me she'd seen Nancy's video and wanted to check if I was okay. I gave her a quick rundown of what was happening. Elizabeth had met Nancy a few times during college and had always said there was something off about her. Turns out Elizabeth was right. After talking to Elizabeth, I decided to take a different approach. Going after Nancy's brand deals and manager was satisfying, but it wasn't getting me what I really wanted. The video taken down. I needed to be smarter about this. I spent the next few hours researching Instagram's community guidelines. Turns out sharing someone else's trauma without consent could potentially violate their rules against harassment. I filed a report against the video, then encouraged Charles and Elizabeth to do the same. We got about 10 of our friends to report it too. By that evening, Instagram had removed the video. Small victory, but I knew Nancy would be furious. Sure enough, my phone exploded with texts from her. I didn't read them. Instead, I blocked her number. I needed some peace. The next day, I woke up to an email from Nancy. She'd created a new account just to contact me. The subject line was, "You're going to regret this. Real mature." The email itself was a long rant about how I was trying to silence her truth and censor her content. She threatened to post more stories about our childhood if I didn't stop attacking her career. I forwarded the email to Charles and Elizabeth, then deleted it. I wasn't going to engage with her threats, but I did need to prepare for whatever she might do next. I decided to get ahead of the situation. I created a private Instagram account and posted a single statement explaining that my sister had shared deeply personal information about me without my consent, and that I was taking steps to protect my privacy. I only accepted follow requests from people I knew and trusted. 2 days passed without any new drama from Nancy. I started to hope that maybe she'd gotten the message. Maybe losing the video and having her brand deals canceled was enough to make her back off. I was wrong. On the 3rd day, I got a call from my mom. We hadn't spoken in months. Our relationship had always been strained, especially after I moved out for college and refused to come back home during breaks. She wasn't abusive like my dad, but she had enabled him, looked the other way. I never forgave her for that. She was crying on the phone, asking why I was spreading lies about my father. Apparently, Nancy had called her and told her I was making up stories about dad for attention. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak for a minute. Nancy had completely twisted the situation around. I tried to explain what really happened. That Nancy was the one who had shared the truth about dad publicly, without my permission. But Mom didn't believe me. She kept saying Nancy would never do something like that I must be confused or lying. After I hung up, I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for an hour. The unfairness of it all was overwhelming. Nancy had not only exposed my trauma to the world, but she was now gaslighting our mother about it and turning her against me. Charles came over that night with takeout and ice cream. He held me while I cried some more. He suggested I take a break from social media for a while. Maybe even take a few days off work to clear my head. It was tempting, but I knew retreating now would only give Nancy more power. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of notifications. Nancy had gone on a live stream the night before, sobbing about how her mentally unstable sister was trying to ruin her life because of jealousy. She claimed I had always been envious of her success and was now making up lies to hurt her. The comments were full of her followers sending her support and calling me awful names. Some were even threatening to find my personal information and teach me a lesson. I felt sick reading them. Elizabeth called me in a panic. She'd seen the live stream and was worried about my safety. She offered to come stay with me for a few days. I accepted. Having a friend around would help keep me grounded. Elizabeth arrived that afternoon with a suitcase and her laptop. She worked remotely as a graphic designer so she could stay as long as needed. As soon as she walked in, she gave me a big hug and told me we were going to figure this out together. We spent the evening making a plan. Elizabeth pointed out that Nancy's biggest weapon was her platform and her ability to control the narrative. If I wanted to fight back effectively, I needed to find a way to tell my side of the story that Nancy couldn't twist or delete. The idea came to me around midnight. Nancy wasn't the only one with receipts. I had years of texts, emails, and even some recorded phone calls from states where one-party consent is legal that showed who Nancy really was. I had evidence of her admitting to the test with Thomas, planning to use my breakup for content, and even discussing how she could monetize our family drama. I didn't want to sink to her level by posting all this publicly, but I could create a document with all the evidence and share it privately with the brands she was still working with, explaining the situation calmly and professionally. Elizabeth helped me organize everything chronologically. We spent hours putting together a PDF that told the whole story, from the first time Nancy used me for content when I was crying over my cheating ex to the recent video about our dad. We included screenshots, recordings, and a clear explanation of each incident. By morning, we had a comprehensive document that showed Nancy's pattern of exploitation and manipulation. We found email addresses for the marketing departments of her remaining brand partners and sent them each a copy, along with a brief professional note explaining that I wasn't trying to cause trouble, but felt they should know who they were working with. I didn't expect much to happen right away. These things take time. But by that afternoon, 2 more brands had announced they were re-evaluating their partnership with Nancy. One even reached out to me directly, apologizing for the situation and thanking me for bringing it to their attention. Nancy must have realized what was happening because she showed up at my apartment again. This time, Elizabeth was there. She peeked through the peephole and told me it was Nancy, looking furious. We decided not to answer. Nancy started banging on the door, yelling that she knew I was home and that I needed to stop this childish game before she really got angry. Elizabeth and I sat silently in the living room, listening to her rant. After about 20 minutes, a neighbor must have complained because we heard another voice in the hallway, then Nancy's footsteps stomping away. As soon as she left, Elizabeth suggested we go stay at her place for a few days. She lived in a secure building with a doorman, so Nancy wouldn't be able to get in. I agreed it was probably safer. We quickly packed some essentials and headed to Elizabeth's apartment across town. On the way, Charles called. He'd been trying to reach me for hours. Apparently, Nancy had found his number somehow and had been calling and texting him nonstop, alternating between threatening him and trying to convince him that I was unstable and needed help. Charles had blocked her, but he was worried about me. I assured him I was safe and explained that Elizabeth and I were going to lay low at her place for a while. He offered to come over later with dinner. Elizabeth's apartment was small but cozy, with plants everywhere, and a cat named Chairman Meow, who immediately decided my suitcase was his new bed. I felt safer as soon as we walked in. We spent the rest of the day monitoring the fallout from our emails. 3 more brands had quietly removed Nancy from their websites. Her follower count was dropping too, as people began to notice the pattern of brands distancing themselves from her. That evening, Nancy went live again. This time, she was calmer, more calculated. She said she had been reflecting on recent events and wanted to clear the air. She admitted that she had shared family stories without permission, but claimed she had only done it to help others who might be going through similar situations. She never mentioned me by name, but she talked about how certain people in her life were trying to silence her because they were uncomfortable with the truth. She ended by saying she was taking a short break from social media to focus on healing. Elizabeth and I watched the whole thing, rolling our eyes so hard it hurt. This was classic Nancy, making a non-apology that somehow still made her the victim, then announcing a break that would probably last all of 48 hours. Charles arrived with Thai food around 8. The 3 of us sat on Elizabeth's living room floor, eating pad Thai and strategizing. Charles thought Nancy's break was a good sign. Maybe she was finally realizing she couldn't win this fight. Elizabeth wasn't so sure. She thought Nancy was just regrouping, planning her next move. I was somewhere in the middle. I hoped Nancy would back off, but I wasn't counting on it. And I still hadn't achieved my main goal, getting her to post a real apology and promise to stop using me as content. The next morning, I woke up to an email from a name I didn't recognize. Morgan Thompson. The subject line was, regarding Nancy. I opened it cautiously. Morgan introduced herself as a former friend of Nancy's who had had a similar experience with her. Nancy had shared private details about Morgan's divorce on her Instagram without permission, then played the victim when Morgan confronted her. Morgan had seen Nancy's recent posts and guessed what was happening. She wanted to know if there was anything she could do to help. I showed the email to Elizabeth. She did some quick social media stalking and confirmed that Morgan appeared to be legit. She and Nancy had posted photos together about a year ago, then suddenly stopped interacting online. I replied to Morgan, thanking her for reaching out and briefly explaining the situation. Within an hour, she responded with her phone number, suggesting we talk directly. Our phone call lasted over 2 hours. Morgan had even more Nancy stories than I did. Nancy had apparently been doing this kind of thing for years, using friends, boyfriends, even co-workers as content without their permission. When confronted, she always twisted the situation to make herself the victim. The most valuable thing Morgan shared was that there were others, at least 5 other former friends of Nancy's who had similar experiences. She offered to connect me with them if I wanted. I immediately said yes. By that evening, I was part of a group chat with 6 women, all of whom had been exploited by Nancy in some way. We shared our stories and compared notes. The pattern was always the same. Nancy would get close to someone, learn their secrets or vulnerabilities, then use those for content. When confronted, she would gaslight, play the victim, and often try to turn others against the person who had called her out. One woman, Patricia, had actually gone through almost exactly what I was experiencing now. Nancy had shared details about Patricia's eating disorder, then claimed she was doing it to raise awareness. When Patricia had tried to get the content removed, Nancy had painted her as triggered and trying to silence important conversations. The group was incredibly supportive. They understood what I was going through in a way even Charles and Elizabeth couldn't. And they had practical advice too, based on their own experiences with Nancy. Patricia suggested we all report Nancy's account for harassment, which might trigger a review of her entire account. not just the specific video about me. Another woman, Riley, she preferred to stay anonymous, recommended documenting everything in case I ever needed to get a restraining order. With their encouragement, I decided to take more direct action. I drafted a formal cease and desist letter, stating clearly that Nancy did not have permission to share any information about me on social media or any other platform. I wasn't sure if it would have any legal weight, but it would at least show Nancy I was serious. I sent the letter by certified mail so I'd have proof she received it. Then I waited. 3 days passed without any new posts from Nancy. Her break from social media seemed to be real this time. I started to relax a little. Maybe the combination of losing brand deals, getting the cease and desist, and knowing that her former friends were now connected had finally gotten through to her. I was wrong again. On the 4th day, Nancy posted a 20-minute video titled, "The Truth About My Sister." In it, she claimed that I had been jealous of her success for years and was now trying to destroy her career because of it. She twisted every interaction we'd had over the past few years to fit this narrative. The worst part was when she brought up our childhood. She admitted that our dad had been abusive, but suggested that I had conflated or misremembered certain events due to trauma responses. She never outright said I was lying about what he did to me, but she heavily implied it. I was shaking with rage by the end of the video. Elizabeth had to take my phone away because I was ready to drive straight to Nancy's apartment and confront her face to face. Instead, Elizabeth called Charles, who came right over. The 3 of us sat in Elizabeth's kitchen, trying to figure out what to do next. This was a new level of betrayal. Nancy wasn't just using my trauma for content anymore. She was actively trying to discredit me and rewrite history. That's when I got a text from Patricia. She and the other women from the group chat had all seen Nancy's new video. They were as disgusted as I was. And they had a suggestion. What if we all shared our stories publicly, together? The idea was powerful. One person speaking out against Nancy could be dismissed as a hater or someone with a grudge. But 7 women, all with similar experiences, all with receipts, that would be much harder to ignore or discredit. We set up a Zoom call for that evening to discuss the details. Everyone agreed that we didn't want to sink to Nancy's level by sharing private information about her. Instead, we would each tell our own story. How we knew Nancy, how she had used us for content without consent, and how she had reacted when confronted. We decided to create a simple website where we could post our stories, along with whatever evidence each person felt comfortable sharing. We would keep it factual and avoid personal attacks. The goal wasn't to cancel Nancy, but to warn others about her pattern of behavior and hopefully get her to stop. Elizabeth, being a graphic designer, offered to create the website. We spent the next few days gathering our stories and evidence. Each woman wrote her own account, focusing on specific incidents and including screenshots or recordings when possible. I wrote about the time Nancy posted about me crying over my cheating ex, the test she set up with Thomas, and of course, the recent video about our dad. I included screenshots of texts where she admitted to these things, sometimes even bragging about how much engagement they got her. We launched the website on a Monday morning. We didn't promote it widely, we just shared it with our own networks and sent the link to the brands Nancy was still working with. We wanted the truth to be available, but we weren't trying to create a public spectacle. The response was immediate. By lunchtime, the site had thousands of views. People were sharing it on Twitter and Reddit. Nancy's remaining brand partners began to distance themselves one by one. Her follower count dropped by thousands. Nancy's initial response was to go private on all her social media accounts. Then she posted a story claiming she was being targeted by a coordinated harassment campaign, and that everything on the website was lies and manipulation. No one was buying it. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too consistent across all 7 stories. People who had followed Nancy for years were now seeing her in a new light. By evening, Nancy had deleted her story and posted a new one saying she was taking time to reflect and would address these allegations soon. It was the first time I'd seen her on the defensive rather than immediately attacking. The next day, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Nancy, using a friend's phone since I had blocked her. She wanted to meet in person to talk things through. I showed the text to Elizabeth and Charles. They both advised against meeting her alone. I suggested a public place with both of them present. Nancy agreed, though she wasn't happy about it. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown the following afternoon. I barely slept that night, running through different scenarios in my head. Would Nancy be angry? Tearful? Would she try to manipulate me again? I had no idea what to expect. The next day, Charles, Elizabeth, and I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. We chose a table in the corner where we could see the door. Elizabeth had her laptop open, pretending to work but really ready to record if necessary. Legal in our state. Nancy walked in 5 minutes late. She looked different, tired, less put together than usual. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she spoke. She asked if I was happy now that I had destroyed her career. Her voice was quiet but bitter. I told her this wasn't about her career. It was about her repeatedly using me and others for content without consent. It was about her sharing my trauma publicly, then trying to discredit me when I objected. She started to argue, but I cut her off. I told her I had one simple request. Post a genuine apology, admit what she did was wrong, and promise never to use me as content again. If she did that, I would consider the matter closed. Nancy laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. She said her followers would never believe she had done anything wrong, that an apology would just make her look guilty, that I was asking her to commit career suicide. Charles, who had been silent until now, pointed out that her career was already in trouble. Most of her brand deals were gone. Her follower count was dropping daily. The website with all our stories was getting more traffic every hour. An apology might actually be her best move at this point. Nancy looked at him like she wanted to slap him. Then she turned back to me. She asked what would happen if she refused to apologize. Would I take the website down if she promised to never mention me again? I shook my head. The website wasn't just about me. It was about all 7 of us, and our collective experiences. I couldn't and wouldn't speak for the others, but I told her that from my perspective, a public apology was non-negotiable. Nancy sat there for a long moment, tapping her fingers on the table. Finally, she stood up. She said she needed time to think. Then she walked out without another word. We sat there for a while after she left, processing what had happened. It wasn't the explosive confrontation I had expected. Nancy had seemed deflated, like she was finally realizing she couldn't manipulate or intimidate her way out of this situation. Later that evening, I got a text from Morgan. Nancy had reached out to her, asking if there was any way to get the website taken down. Morgan had told her the same thing I had, that a public apology was the minimum requirement. The next morning, Nancy posted a video. It wasn't the tearful, dramatic apology I had half expected. Instead, it was surprisingly straightforward. She admitted that she had shared personal information about several people without their consent. She acknowledged that this was wrong, regardless of her intentions, and she promised to do better in the future. She mentioned me specifically, saying she was especially sorry for sharing details about our childhood trauma without my permission, and for trying to discredit me when I objected. She said there was no excuse for her behavior, and that she was taking time away from social media to reevaluate her priorities. I watched the video 3 times, looking for the catch, the subtle manipulation, the way she would turn this around to make herself the victim again, but I couldn't find it. It seemed genuine, or at least as genuine as Nancy was capable of being. I forwarded the video to the group chat with the other women. Their reactions were mixed. Some thought it was a good first step. Others were more skeptical, pointing out that Nancy only apologized after her career was threatened. I wasn't sure what to think. Part of me wanted to believe Nancy had finally understood the impact of her actions. Another part remembered all the times she had seemed to change, only to revert to her old behaviors as soon as it was convenient. For now, I decided to take the apology at face value. I texted Nancy a simple, "Thank you for the apology." And she responded almost immediately with, "I really am sorry." It was the most straightforward interaction we'd had in years. Over the next few weeks, Nancy kept her word about staying off social media. The website remained up, but traffic to it naturally decreased as the drama faded. Most of Nancy's former brand partners moved on to other influencers. Her follower count stabilized at about half what it had been before. I moved back to my own apartment, though Elizabeth and I had become even closer friends through the whole ordeal. Charles was supportive throughout, never once suggesting that I should just let it go or be the bigger person. He understood that this wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up for myself and setting boundaries. About a month after her apology video, Nancy texted asking if we could meet again, just the two of us this time. I was hesitant but curious about what she wanted to say. We arranged to meet at the same coffee shop. This time, Nancy was on time. She looked different again, more like her old self before the influencer fame had changed her. She had even dyed her hair back to its natural color. She told me she had been in intensive therapy since her apology video, that she was working through a lot of issues, including why she felt the need to exploit others for attention and validation. She said she wasn't asking for forgiveness, just a chance to prove over time that she had changed. I told her I was willing to give her that chance, but that my trust would have to be earned back slowly, that I needed to see consistent behavior change, not just promises. She nodded, seeming to understand. Then she asked about our childhood, about Dad. Not for content, she quickly clarified, but because she was trying to process her own trauma from that time. We ended up talking for hours, more honestly than we had in years. I left that meeting cautiously optimistic. Not that Nancy and I would ever have the close sister relationship I had once hoped for, but that maybe we could build something new, something based on mutual respect and boundaries. As I drove home, I realized something important. This whole ordeal had started because I wanted to make Nancy pay for what she did. But what I really gained wasn't revenge. It was my voice. The courage to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, to say no when someone tried to use me. And that was worth more than any revenge could ever be. I walked into my apartment that night feeling weirdly calm. After months of chaos with Nancy, I finally felt like I had some control back. The website with all our stories was working. Brands were dropping her. And most importantly, she seemed to be on the defensive for once. Charles called to check in. He wanted to know how I was feeling after the coffee shop confrontation. I told him I was okay, just tired. The emotional roller coaster of the past few weeks had completely drained me. He offered to come over, but I told him I needed some alone time to process everything. I woke up the next morning to a text from Patricia. Nancy had reached out to her too, asking for a private meeting. Patricia wasn't sure what to do. I told her about my experience at the coffee shop, how Nancy had seemed deflated rather than combative. Patricia decided she'd meet Nancy, but in a public place with a friend nearby, just to be safe. Later that day, Elizabeth sent me a screenshot of Nancy's Instagram. She'd posted a story saying she was taking a social media break to focus on personal growth. There was no mention of the website or the allegations against her, just a vague statement about reflecting on past mistakes and learning to be better. Classic Nancy non-apology. I showed it to Charles when he came over that evening. He thought it was a good sign that she wasn't attacking me publicly anymore. I wasn't so sure. This felt like a tactical retreat, not a genuine change of heart. My phone rang around 8 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. It was my mom. She was crying. Apparently Nancy had called her again, but this time with a completely different story. She'd admitted that she was the one who had shared our family trauma online, not me. She'd confessed to lying about me being jealous and trying to ruin her career. I sat down on my couch, stunned. This didn't sound like Nancy at all. My mom kept talking, saying she was sorry for believing Nancy's lies, that she should have known better. I barely heard her. My mind was racing, trying to figure out Nancy's angle. What was she getting out of this sudden honesty? After I hung up with Mom, I called Elizabeth. She had a theory. Nancy realized she was losing the PR battle and was trying to salvage what relationships she could. Starting with our mom made sense. She was an easier target than me or the other women she'd exploited. The next morning, I got another surprise. Morgan forwarded me an email Nancy had sent to everyone in our group. It was a lengthy apology, acknowledging specific incidents where she'd used each of us for content without permission. She admitted to gaslighting us when confronted and trying to turn others against us when we stood up for ourselves. The email ended with a request. Nancy wanted to make a public apology video addressing everything she'd done. She asked if we would be willing to review it before she posted it, to make sure she wasn't missing anything or unintentionally continuing harmful patterns. Our group chat exploded with reactions. Some thought it was another manipulation tactic. Others believed she might be genuinely remorseful. We debated back and forth for hours. Finally, Patricia suggested a compromise. We would agree to review Nancy's apology video, but we'd make it clear that our approval wasn't an endorsement or forgiveness. We were simply confirming that she was accurately acknowledging what she'd done wrong. I drafted the response and sent it to Nancy after everyone in the group approved it. She replied almost immediately, thanking us and promising to send the video draft within a few days. True to her word, Nancy sent the video 3 days later. It was surprisingly good. She took full responsibility for her actions without making excuses. She named each specific incident and explained why it was wrong. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to paint herself as a victim. She just acknowledged the harm she'd caused and promised to do better. We suggested a few minor changes, mostly around language that still felt a bit manipulative. Nancy accepted all our edits without argument and posted the final version the next day. The response was immediate and massive. Nancy's followers were shocked by her admissions. Some defended her, claiming we were just trying to cancel her out of jealousy. But most seemed to appreciate her honesty. The video got more views than anything she'd posted in months. I watched the comment section carefully, ready to jump in if Nancy started liking or responding to comments that attacked me or the others. But she didn't. She only engaged with comments that focused on accountability and growth, ignoring the ones that tried to absolve her of responsibility. A week passed. Then 2. Nancy remained quiet on social media aside from responding to comments on her apology video. No new content, no stories, no attempts to capitalize on the situation for views. It was the longest she'd ever gone without posting something about her personal life. I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she was actually changing. But I'd been fooled by Nancy too many times before to fully trust this apparent transformation. My suspicions were confirmed when Elizabeth called me in a panic one morning. She'd been checking Nancy's social media accounts daily, something I'd stopped doing for my own mental health, and had noticed something concerning. Nancy had started following several accountability coaches and redemption story content creators, people who specialized in helping public figures rehabilitate their image after scandals. She's planning a comeback, Elizabeth said. This whole apology thing is just phase 1 of her rebranding strategy. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. Of course, Nancy wasn't really changing. She was just adapting her approach, finding a new angle for content. Instead of being the relatable influencer who shared family stories, she'd become the reformed bully on a journey of personal growth, and she'd probably find a way to use me in that narrative too. I called an emergency Zoom meeting with the other women from the website. We needed to prepare for whatever Nancy might do next. Patricia suggested we update the website to acknowledge Nancy's apology video, but make it clear we were still watching to see if her behavior actually changed. Riley thought we should just leave things as they were and not engage further. We were still debating when my phone lit up with a text from Nancy. She wanted to meet again, just the two of us. Said she had something important to discuss that couldn't be done over text or phone. I shared the message with the group. It's a trap, Morgan said immediately. She's going to record your conversation and twist it somehow. That seemed likely. But I was also curious. What new manipulation was Nancy planning? And did I really want to spend the next months or years constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for her next move? I decided to meet her, but with precautions. I told her I'd meet at a public park near my apartment. I'd have Charles and Elizabeth nearby, out of sight but close enough to intervene if needed. And I'd record the entire conversation myself, so she couldn't selectively edit anything later. Nancy agreed to all my conditions without argument, which only made me more suspicious. We set the meeting for the following afternoon. I barely slept that night, running through possible scenarios in my head. What did Nancy want? Another chance to manipulate me? Material for her redemption content? Or was she planning something more vindictive? The next day, I arrived at the park 20 minutes early. Charles and Elizabeth were already there, pretending to have a picnic about 50 feet from our meeting spot. I sat on a bench and waited, phone recording in my pocket. Nancy showed up right on time. She looked different, less polished, more like the sister I remembered from before she became an influencer. She sat beside me, leaving plenty of space between us. Thanks for meeting me, she said. Her voice was quiet, lacking its usual confidence. I nodded but didn't say anything. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Nancy took a deep breath. I'm leaving social media, she said. For good. That was not what I expected to hear. What do you mean? I'm deleting all my accounts. I've already told my remaining sponsors. I'm done with being an influencer. I stared at her, trying to see the angle. Why? Because I don't like who I've become, she said simply. The apology video wasn't just for show, and I meant it. And making it forced me to really look at my behavior over the past few years. I don't recognize myself anymore. She pulled out her phone and showed me an email. It was a job offer from a marketing firm in Seattle, 3,000 miles away from where we lived. She'd already accepted. I'm starting over, she said. New city, new job, new me. Away from the temptation to turn everything and everyone into content. I still didn't trust it. And you're telling me this because you're my sister, and because I owe you the biggest apology of all. She looked down at her hands. I've been in intensive therapy since everything blew up. My therapist helped me see how much damage I've done, especially to you. I used your trauma for views. I betrayed your trust over and over. I tried to gaslight you when you called me out. There's no excuse for any of it. I'd heard Nancy apologize before, usually right before she did something even worse. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was the lack of dramatic tears, or the fact that she wasn't filming this for content, or maybe it was just that she seemed smaller somehow, more human. I don't expect you to forgive me, she continued when I didn't respond. I wouldn't, in your position. I just wanted you to know that I'm removing myself from your life. You won't have to worry about me using you for content anymore because there won't be any content. I'm done. She stood up, pulling a small envelope from her pocket and placing it on the bench between us. That's a copy of the lease termination from my apartment and my flight details to Seattle. I leave next week. I'm not telling anyone else where I'm going. Not my followers, not my friends in the industry. Just you and Mom. I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. Why should I believe any of this? Nancy shrugged. You shouldn't, based on my track record. But it's the truth. I guess you'll see when I actually leave and don't come back. She turned to go, then paused. One more thing. I've set up an appointment with a lawyer next month to discuss getting a restraining order against Dad. I don't know if you'd be interested in joining that process, but I thought you should know. No pressure either way. With that, she walked away. No tearful goodbye, no dramatic last words. She just left. I sat there for a long time after she was gone, trying to process what had just happened. Charles and Elizabeth eventually came over, full of questions. I showed them the envelope with Nancy's lease termination and flight details. It all looked legitimate. Do you believe her? Elizabeth asked. I don't know, I admitted. It seems too good to be true. We spent the next week watching Nancy's social media accounts closely. She posted one final video announcing her departure from social media, thanking her followers for their support but explaining that she needed to step away for her mental health and to repair damaged relationships. She didn't mention me or any specific incidents, just said she'd made mistakes she needed to make right, and that wouldn't happen while she was still creating content. Then, true to her word, she deleted all her accounts. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everything gone in a single day. Her website redirected to a simple page that said, "Thank you for the memories," and nothing else. I still half expected it to be some elaborate stunt. Maybe she was planning to relaunch with a big comeback story about her social media detox, but the days passed, and there was no sign of Nancy anywhere online. The day of her flight came. Charles offered to drive me to the airport if I wanted to see her off, but I declined. I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I texted her a simple, "Safe travels." She replied with, "Thank you," and nothing more. That evening, Mom called to tell me Nancy had landed in Seattle. She really had left, just like she said she would. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. I kept expecting some new drama from Nancy, some new way she'd find to insert herself into my life, but there was nothing. She called Mom once a week, but never asked about me or tried to contact me directly. A month after she left, I got an email from Nancy's lawyer about the restraining order against Dad. It included information about the process and what would be involved if I wanted to join the petition. I sat on it for a few days, then decided to at least have a consultation. Charles came with me for support. The lawyer was professional and straightforward. She explained that Nancy had already begun the process based on her own experiences, but my testimony would strengthen the case. I wouldn't have to see Dad or speak to him directly. I could submit a written statement or do a deposition with just the lawyers present. I agreed to think about it. On my way out, the lawyer handed me a sealed envelope. "Nancy asked me to give you this if you came in," she said. She was very clear that I shouldn't try to persuade you one way or the other about the restraining order. This is separate. I opened the envelope when I got home. Inside was a check for a substantial amount of money and a short note. "This is all the money I made from content that involved you in any way. I calculated it based on views and sponsorships. It belongs to you, not me. Please use it however you want. Therapy, vacation, burn it, whatever helps you heal. T." I sat down hard on my couch, staring at the check. This didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like atonement. 2 months after Nancy left, I finally decided to join the restraining order petition. Not for her, but for me. And maybe a little bit for the scared kids we once were. We won the case. Dad wasn't allowed to contact either of us anymore. It felt like closing a chapter that had been left painfully open for too long. Nancy and I still don't talk much. Just occasional texts about practical matters. She's kept her word about staying off social media. According to Mom, she's doing well at her marketing job, living a normal, private life. As for me, I used part of Nancy's money for therapy. Turns out I had a lot to process. Not just about Nancy, but about our whole family. The rest I put toward a down payment on a small house. Charles moved in with me last month. We're talking about getting a dog. Sometimes people ask if I miss having a close relationship with my sister. The truth is, I miss the sister I thought I had before she became an influencer. The real Nancy, the one who exploited my trauma for views, I don't miss her at all. But this new Nancy, the one who's actually respecting my boundaries, I'm cautiously optimistic that maybe, someday, we might build something real. Something based on honesty instead of content. Something that exists entirely offline, where it belongs. For now, though, I'm just enjoying the peace. No drama, no viral videos, no wondering if my private moments are being recorded for strangers on the internet. Just a normal, boring life. And after everything that happened, boring feels pretty damn good.